Ben Domenech and that podcast, I can't wait to hear it. His interview with Mark Esper, don't miss it. He is editor at The Transom. He is a Fox News contributor, co-founder of The Federalist. And The Federalist is, had been, I should say, embroiled in a tussle with the National Labor Relations Board. I don't know if people remember this from your last visit. It was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard, but when you wind up in court with the government, that can always be, I would imagine, a little daunting. And it was all over a tweet where you basically said, first one of you who tries to unionize, I swear I'll send you back to the salt mine, which was meant to be obviously glib and tongue-in-cheek. And it turns out the court ultimately agreed with you.
Yes. Just to give people some quick perspective on this, it was a lawsuit brought against me by a couple of random individuals, lefty trolls, pro-union trolls online, who reported my tweet to the National Labor Relations Board, and they decided to take it up as a case. They pursued that case over the course of 3 years. I'll now be doing FOIA requests and more to find out how much it cost the American taxpayer to sue me for that long. And basically, the way these lawsuits are supposed to work is that they come in and they threaten you with all manner of ramifications, and then you kneel and you just go along with what they want you to do, which in my case was very easy. There wasn't a fine or anything. I would just had to delete the tweet and basically post some kind of apologetic thing to my employees. And the reason that I refused to do it is because I think the National Labor Relations Board should not be able to take up cases that are just put before them by random trolls. This was not an employee. This was not someone who's ever even met me or been in the same room as me, or done any work for me in any capacity. And the fact that he was able to bring a suit like this that, had the potential to, really, throw a wrench in everything that we were doing. And, they wanted to grasp a hold, subpoena any kind of communication going back years between my employees, that type of thing. It was a real invasion. And I just said no. And thankfully, the folks over at the New Civil Liberties Alliance, which is basically doing a lot of the work that the ACLU ought to be doing, but they've gotten distracted by wokeness. The NCLA stood up, they're a nonprofit, and said, look, we think you've got a real argument here. And they took this case up. They fought it within the bureaucracy at NLRB, where you have a judge who's also a bureaucrat who who's appointed to make a decision about your case. And of course, we lost that one. But then we ended up in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, a real court, where you had real judges hearing this case. And they unanimously found in my favor, thankfully, on both free speech grounds and on evidentiary grounds, saying that the NLRB had no proof whatsoever that anyone viewed what I said as a threat. And in fact, that no reasonable person could conceivably imagine it as a real threat. And then, in addition to that, there was a concurrence from one of the judges who they really teed this up in the sense that saying, look, the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, is really overstepping what it was intended to do. And this is something that the Supreme Court or that the Congress needs to take a look at, because in this era of social media, in their words, it empowers more busybodies and people who want to, screw around with other people online versus actual people who are civic-minded in their reporting of anti-unionization activity or the like. And I think that's very true. And I think that, look, I'll be quite honest. Nothing against the American taxpayer, but I hope the NLRB appeals. I hope that they take this to the Supreme Court, because I believe that they will lose, and I believe that they will lose definitively. And I think that this may reopen the question of whether this is the kind of power that a bureaucratic agency ought to be able to exercise, coming from someone who has no connection whatsoever to any entity or small business. Look, there's a real possibility that someone walks by your small business, dislikes a political sign that they see on your car or in the window, and then finds some way to report you, and then you could be facing massive legal fees and the like, because you don't have the kind of connections that I have to, nonprofit, high-quality lawyers. And that's one of the things that I think, was really on my mind during all of this, because, look, I just think that they chose the wrong person to tussle with. And at the end of the day, they lost. They lost definitively. It was unanimous. And I hope that this leads to a process that, has real reconsideration, lest we have an online troll army of leftists who feel, empowered to go after people just because of how they vote or who they give money to.
Ben, I'm so grateful to you that you did this. I want to ask you, I guess, twofold. Number one, how critically important is it that we stand up and fight? You made the point, though, a lot of people either don't know how or just out of sheer fear or the fact that they don't have the resources and the finances, they just fold. One, how important is it to stand up right now? But number two, are you somewhat satisfied at what we're seeing with, for instance, people like Elon Musk, who seem to be forcing Twitter to take a look under the hood at how they're doing things? This whole online war that's been waged against citizens in this country for just speaking their mind, it seems maybe like we're starting to see it falling apart a little, or is that too optimistic?
I don't think it's too optimistic to say that there are cracks where you're seeing the truth shine through, and that there's some people who are making those cracks bigger. Elon Musk taking kind of a sledgehammer to the Twitter facade, regardless of how that ends up turning out. People who I think have the willingness to stand up and fight on these issues end up empowering others or becoming a model for others on how to approach it. Look, from my perspective, the New York Post situation was a line in the sand. And now, especially that we know that Hillary Clinton herself was approving the handling of disinformation about the Trump campaign, spreading that during the election in ways that are really disturbing. I think that we are going to have to face a reality where the need for people to stand up and be brave in these moments and to find new ways to fight back is all the more critical. And that requires, I think, turning to new entities like the NCLA, but also others that are willing to stand up in each of these environments against the crushing weight of academia. If an organization like FIRE has done this, against the crushing weight of the bureaucracy, against these different methods that the left is using to try to crush you. And one of the things that people really need to keep in mind in this moment is that it's not just about you. It's much easier to cave in these moments, especially when the stakes seem to be so outsized, in one respect. It's just a tweet, it's just a comment, it's just, something that you said that you might second guess. Why don't you just retract it and bend the knee? Because otherwise, you could lose your whole business, you could lose your livelihood, you could lose, so much about what makes a life worth living. And I think that what we have to understand is that is just a death by 1,000 cuts. And we can't go along with it. We have to push back against it. We have to stand up against it. And the people who are willing to do that, I think, actually, they find that people will be roused to their defense and will come and help them and recognize the courage that they are displaying. You just have to have those. You have to reach out to the people in order to tell your story and let it be known what's going on.
Ben Domenech, editor at the Transom, Fox News contributor, co-founder of the Federalist. Thank you, my friend, as always, for your fight and your brain and your time. You're always welcome back. And the podcast with Mark Esper. Don't miss that as well. Thank you, sir.